Imagine, if you will, standing right in the middle of a multi-billion-dollar manufacturing facility,
Oh, yeah.
and it is absolutely pristine. Like, you are surrounded by rows and rows of, honestly, the most advanced technology humanity has ever created. It's a total monument to modern engineering.
Right, the pinnacle of tech.
Exactly. But the entire assembly line is completely stopped.
Just dead in the water.
Yeah, dead in the water. The machines are quiet. The engineers are just kind of, standing around checking their watches. And thousands of units of this incredibly expensive hardware are just sitting there, completely unfinished.
It's a staggering image, really.
And why? Because somewhere across the world, a supplier ran out of a very specific, incredibly niche piece of material. And now the entire global tech supply chain is just holding its breath.
Yeah, it's wild how fragile it can be.
It is, and we were looking at a highly concentrated market note today that explains exactly why this is happening. It's this snapshot of the frantic tech supply chain and really the dizzying psychology of trying to invest in it.
Right, and it's a very brief source, but
It's so dense.
exactly. Beneath its surface is an entire philosophy about, how we consume information, and why the author insists that conquering your FOMO, your fear of missing out, is literally the only way to survive the daily news cycle.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, the brevity of the source material is actually what makes it so striking. I mean, it presents this really dense cascade of information that mimics the overwhelming nature of the market itself.
It really does feel overwhelming to read.
It does. It forces us to confront how we react to this constant, unrelenting stream of new problems. But before we get to the psychology of FOMO, we need to map out the physical reality of this supply chain.
Right.
Because right now, everyone is desperately chasing a moving target.
And the source lays out that target as this staggering sequential chain of bottlenecks. I mean, it reads almost like a recipe for a global headache.
A very expensive headache.
Yeah. But let's actually decode what these acronyms and components mean for you, the listener, because the author throws a massive list at us. It starts with NVDA GPUs, the graphics processing units.
Right, the fundamental engines.
Exactly. These are the brains of the operation, doing all the heavy lifting for these massive computing tasks. But the second you manage to get your hands on enough brains, you hit the first wall, which is MU memory.
Because, frankly, a brain is useless without short-term recall.
Right.
I mean, if you have the fastest processors in the world, they still need a massive continuous flow of data to actually do their job. So the bottleneck immediately shifts. The market realizes, oh, we have the GPUs, but we don't have enough memory chips to feed them. So attention pivots to memory.
But then it shifts again, because let's say you finally get the brains and you get the memory. Now you have these incredibly dense, powerful racks of equipment, and you suddenly realize you don't have the juice to turn them on.
Yeah, the power wall.
The source says the bottleneck moves to iron power. You hit a wall with the sheer physical electricity infrastructure required to run the hardware.
And that's where the cascading nature of this really comes into focus.
Mm-hmm.
Solving one problem doesn't mean the system is finished.
It just exposes the next weak link.
Exactly. It just exposes the next weakest link in the chain. Once the power constraint is momentarily digested, the data flow becomes the issue again. The note mentions a shift to light EMLs and AOI transceivers.
Right, the optical components. Because it's not enough to just process the data inside the server, right? You have to physically move that massive amount of data out of the server and across the network.
Yeah, the highways.
Exactly. Transceivers and EMLs are basically the on-ramps and off-ramps for the fiber optic highways. If those are backed up, the data is trapped.
Trapped completely. And just when you think you've mapped out the brains, the memory, the power, and the highways, the source just circles right back around.
It's exhausting.
It is. It mentions SNDK memory again. It mentions going right back to GPUs again. It mentions INTC CPUs, the traditional processors. And then it gets into the physical construction itself, advanced packaging,
Right.
transformers. And finally, LPK glass substrates, or, as the author brilliantly puts it, some random niche material from Japan.
Oh man, I love that line. Some random niche material from Japan. It really captures the sheer exhaustion of this process. It's like playing the world's most expensive game of whack-a-mole.
That's a great way to look at it.
You are standing there with your mallet, and the second you solve one hardware issue, another pops up. Like you hit the GPU mole, the memory mole pops up. You hit the memory mole, the power infrastructure mole pops up. You hit that, and suddenly you're out of glass substrates.
And that whack-a-mole analogy works on multiple levels, too. Think about the mechanics of that game. Your attention is entirely dictated by whatever is popping up at that exact fraction of a second.
Right. You aren't looking at the mechanics under the board.
Exactly. You are only looking at the immediate crisis on the surface. And the daily news cycle treats the tech supply chain exactly the same way. The headlines blare about a shortage in advanced packaging today, and capital swings its mallet at that issue.
Right.
Tomorrow, the headlines scream about transceivers, and the mallet swings over there.
But I have to push back on this premise just a bit.
Okay, go for it.
If everything from the power grid to the transceivers to the actual physical glass substrates the chips sit on becomes a bottleneck in such rapid compounding succession, are we looking at a legitimate, unexpected supply crisis? Or are we just looking at a fundamental misunderstanding by the market of how complex systems are actually built?
That's an interesting angle.
Because to me, it feels like the market is acting surprised that a car needs an engine, tires, and a steering wheel simultaneously to leave the lot. I mean, a high-end server needs all of these components to function. Why is the market treating each requirement as a sudden, isolated shock?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the mechanism of complex manufacturing is exactly what the market is failing to grasp.
Right.
A multi-billion-dollar data center is only as fast as its slowest component. If you are missing one specific, niche material for the packaging, the entire server cannot be shipped.
Right, it just sits there.
Exactly. The physical reality of producing these things is slow, deliberate, and bound by the literal laws of physics and chemistry. The supply chain isn't randomly shifting its mind about what's important. It is simply experiencing the natural stress points of building unprecedented technological infrastructure from scratch.
So the volatility isn't necessarily in the factories. The factories are just doing the incredibly tedious work of building things out of atoms.
Right.
The volatility is purely in the market's perception.
Precisely. Capital wants immediate returns, but physical production requires time. The hyperfixation on whatever component is currently holding up the assembly line creates this illusion of a rapidly shifting, incredibly volatile landscape.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But, a glass substrate facility doesn't get built faster just because a headline was written about it.
Which brings us perfectly to the timelines, because transitioning from what these bottlenecks are to how long they last is crucial for you to understand.
Very crucial.
This disconnect between the lightning-fast speed of the daily news and the slow, grinding reality of manufacturing is exactly what makes playing whack-a-mole so dangerous for anyone trying to navigate this space.
The time frames mentioned in the note are perhaps the most vital pieces of data we have to analyze. The author explicitly grounds the reader in a very specific temporal reality, and then just shatters the illusion that we're operating in the present moment.
Yeah, the note gives us a very clear timestamp. It points out that it is currently H1 2026, the first half of 2026. But then it drops this massive reality check. It says that components like LEAT are already sold out entirely into 2028.
Right.
We are talking about a lead time that stretches across multiple years.
And that multi-year backlog is not an anomaly restricted to one or two niche parts.
Not at all.
The note emphasizes that this entire sequence of bottlenecks from power to memory to optics spans multi-year cycles. And the mechanism driving this unprecedented backlog introduces the most critical actors in this ecosystem, the hyperscalers.
The hyperscalers, these are the massive dominant entities, the major cloud providers and tech giants that are just devouring capacity on a scale that is hard to comprehend.
Truly hard to comprehend.
The source states explicitly that these hyperscalers are, quote, buying out anything AAOI can make.
Let's unpack the mechanics of that because it fundamentally alters how supply and demand function here. When a hyperscaler buys out a component manufacturer, they aren't just placing a large order for products sitting on a shelf.
Right, they're not just clearing out inventory.
No, they are buying the factory's future time. They are locking in the entire production capacity for the next 2 or 3 years. That capacity is effectively removed from the open market before the first unit is even manufactured.
Wow.
The ink is dry on the contracts years before the product physically exists.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. If hyperscalers are physically locking up production capacity years in advance, isn't the daily news cycle essentially just reporting on ancient history?
Yes, absolutely.
Think about it. We're sitting here in the first half of 2026, reading a breaking news headline about a critical bottleneck in transceivers today. But the actual deals that caused that bottleneck, the massive purchase orders by the hyperscalers that locked up the supply until 2028, were clearly negotiated and signed months, if not years ago.
The lag between private action and public awareness is vast.
We are reacting in real time to decisions that were made in the past, You are reading history and mistaking it for breaking news.
And trading on history is a highly reliable way to lose your shirt,
Yeah, definitely.
because you're reacting to a signal that has already been fully absorbed and priced in by the system. The immense scale of these hyperscalers means that the day-to-day news cycle is reduced to mere noise. If a factory is completely sold out from 2026 to 2028, a minor panic over a specific component on a Tuesday in 2026 is completely irrelevant to the structural reality of the market. The trajectory was set long ago.
That realization completely reorients how we should be looking at the information we consume. If the news is just a delayed echo of a deal a hyperscaler made behind closed doors a year ago, reacting to it is essentially chasing ghosts.
Exactly, chasing goes.
Which brings us to the core of the source materials argument. We've mapped out the physical components. We've established that the news cycle lags terribly behind these multi-year buyouts. So what is the actual practical strategy for you, the listener? How do you navigate a space where the information is simultaneously frantic and entirely obsolete?
Well, the note provides a remarkably simple yet psychologically grueling antidote to this environment. It delivers a core piece of advice. It's probably a good idea to just be patient with your existing positions.
Just be patient. It sounds so trivial.
It does.
But when you are surrounded by screens and headlines screaming about the next big shortage, patience feels like negligence. It feels like you are doing something wrong by sitting still.
It absolutely goes against human nature in a high-stress situation.
Yeah. The source finishes with a very specific warning about this. It argues that constantly chasing the current news cycle, jumping your focus from the GPU bottleneck over to the memory bottleneck, and then rushing over to the power bottleneck practically guarantees that you are going to miss out on what they call the random green candle.
Right. And to clarify the terminology here, a green candle on a stock chart represents a period, often a sudden, sharp one, where the price of an asset closes higher than it opened.
It signifies an upward surge.
Exactly. In the context of this note, it represents the moment when the market finally digests the structural value of a position and corrects upward to reflect the reality of those multi-year contracts.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring this down to earth with a scenario we've all experienced. It's exactly like being stuck in a brutal traffic jam on the highway. You are in the middle lane, and your car is at a dead, agonizing stop. You are staring at the bumper in front of you.
We've all been there.
Oh, yeah. You look over, and the left lane seems to be inching forward. Driven entirely by FOMO, the fear that you are missing out on the faster lane, you start monitoring your mirrors. You feel that psychological friction of sitting still while others seem to be making progress.
The worst feeling.
So you wait for a gap, you aggressively cut the wheel, and you switch into that left lane.
And we all know exactly what happens next.
The absolute second you get your car settled into the left lane, the brake lights in front of you illuminate.
Yep.
It comes to a dead halt. And suddenly, your old middle lane, the one you just abandoned, clears up and accelerates away. That old lane speeding away without you is your green candle.
What's fascinating here is how that analogy exposes the mechanics of emotional decision-making versus structural reality. I mean, why did you switch lanes?
Right.
You switched because you needed the illusion of agency. Taking an action, making a move, feels like you are taking control of a frustrating situation. But in reality, you were just reacting to a momentary surface-level shift.
You just reset your position to the back of a new line.
Exactly. The urge to chase the latest bottleneck mentioned in the daily news is driven by the discomfort of sitting still. But the math of multi-year hardware cycles inherently rewards those who can tolerate that discomfort.
Because they're locked in.
Exactly. As we established, these are massive, slow-moving physical trends. Constantly trying to jump from power components to memory chips to optics means you are always arriving late to the party. You are switching into the transceiver lane just as it comes to a halt, because the hyperscalers have already been there, bought everything up, and caused the jam.
So if you hold your position, you align yourself with the slow, inevitable reality of the multi-year cycle, rather than the frantic, exhausting illusion of the daily news. You align yourself with the physical atoms, not the digital headlines.
Right. The author of the note isn't trying to give you a roadmap of what exact component to focus on next.
No.
They are purposefully outlining this dizzying, compounding chain of bottlenecks, from NVDA to MU to iron to light to AOI and beyond, to prove a point. They are showing you the complexity of the maze so that you understand it is futile to try and sprint through it.
They are showing you the maze to prove you shouldn't run it. Because every time you hit a dead end, panic, and turn around, you miss the progress that is about to happen exactly where you started.
Precisely.
Let's bring this all together for you, the listener. The tech supply chain, despite what your daily news feed might scream at you, isn't a series of unexpected daily surprises. It isn't a random lottery of shortages where one day we just, oops, forgot to make glass substrates.
Right.
It is a highly structured, logical, multi-year domino effect.
Mhm.
We have massive entities locking down the entire production capacity for everything from the processing brains to the optical highways years in advance.
The physical constraints of manufacturing dictate the pace of reality, while the headlines only dictate the pace of anxiety. Recognizing this multi-year cycle is incredibly liberating. It is the ultimate data-backed permission slip to let go of your FOMO.
And why does this matter to you?
Hmm.
Because understanding this underlying dynamic saves you from the emotional exhaustion and the very real financial missteps of constantly switching lanes in traffic.
Yeah.
It allows you to look at a terrifying headline about a Japanese material shortage, recognize it simply as a symptom of a much larger, slower process that is already locked in, and simply go about your day. You don't have to scramble. You can just be patient, knowing that the lane you are in is part of a much larger highway that is eventually moving forward.
Patience transforms from a passive trait into a structural advantage. You are actively leveraging time against the market's constant, frantic anxiety.
It is a profound shift in perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But decoding this note also leads us to a pretty intense realization about where this entire sector is heading. And this is the thought we want to leave you with today. We want you to mull this over based strictly on the logic and the timelines the source material laid out for us.
It's a big question.
If hyperscalers are truly operating at this unprecedented scale, if they are locking up the entire production capacity for every single crucial component, completely buying out suppliers all the way into 2028 and beyond, are we moving toward a future where the open market for these tech parts effectively ceases to exist?
Wow.
And if all the physical supply is quietly bought up in private boardrooms years before the products are even manufactured, does the very idea of relying on public news cycles to understand this sector become entirely obsolete? Because if the traffic jam is guaranteed to last until 2028, maybe the best move isn't trying to outsmart the other rivals by switching lanes. Maybe it's turning off the radio entirely and realizing that the road itself has already been bought.